about Darjeeling, organized by the Salem Hill Collective. These conversations will broadly be revolving around the state of the hills. We hope to be inviting artists, writers, researchers, filmmakers, naturalists who are concerned about Darjeeling and its decline, and thereby curate a series of meaningful conversations, spreading awareness about the region, the tea industry, its local communities, and also by means of these conversations, think about the way forward towards a holistic revival. The Salem Hill Collective chose this name because an echo by its very nature travels far and wide. Our hope is that these conversations will reach everyone who cares about Darjeeling and serve as a catalyst for the reinvigoration of Darjeeling. Now I'll be handing over to Mr. Raja Banerjee, who is the chairman of the Salem Hill Collective, to say a few words and open it up for the screening.
Thank you, Sparsh. Hi, everybody who's out there. You'll be happy to know that Sparsh has actually organized a series of episodes every Friday for the next 8 weeks. So this is the second one in the series. In this one, we have an alternative celebrity, Chaitanya Tamhane. And Chaitanya is an Indian filmmaker known very famously for his Marathi courtroom drama, Court. He's very young as it is, and has attained a lot of credits in his young age. This Court was announced as India's official submission for the 88th Academy Awards for the best foreign language film in that category. His latest film, however, The Disciple, now streaming on Netflix, is wowing everybody all over the world. We have a lot of Italians today. They'll be happy to know this was premiered at the Venice Film Festival recently. And I'm sure he's bagged a few awards. His connection to me was in his first short film 10 years ago as a holistic producer, a filmmaker, as a writer, a director, and producer, inspired, you would be surprised, by a signature tea of mine. It's called the Silver Needle Full Moon Plug. But here's the trick about Chaitanya. If you remove the Tanya from his name, you are remaining with only chai. So he's going to spin a lot of web on his chai. Let's see how he takes it forward. Prior to that, I'd like also to introduce Anand Gupta. He's a young man on a mission. It's also a media and cultural studies scholar. He's got a master's from Mumbai's Starters Institute of Social Sciences. But I personally think he's a seeker. He's a seeker of the three issues that challenges all of us. Where do we come from? What are we doing in this terrestrial inferno? And where do we go? Right now, he's trying to fathom it out in the foothills of the Bhutanese forests. I hand you over now to Anand and Chaitanya and Sparsh. Take it away, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raja, for those very. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Raja, for that introduction. Sparsh, have you shared the link?
I think Sparsh has gone on the pink as it happens. We can't hear him at all.
Okay, so I think we could begin with screening the film. We've shared a drive link.
Yeah, so let's screen the Six Strands that brought us together, shall we?
Absolutely. So Sparsh has shared a link on the chat. So Chaitanya asked us to share with everyone the film, and he encourages us to watch it on our own using the drive link. But for everyone else, we'll also be streaming the film on the Zoom platform itself. But it'll be preferable if you watch it using that link because you'll get a better view of the film. Of course, watching together and getting closest to the cinema hall experience as possible is what Zoom offers. So let's try that as well, right? But yeah, try the link if you want the most rewarding experience of the film. Okay, I think the link that we shared with people, I think those people also must have completed the film by now. So should we start, Chaitanya?
Sure. Sure.
So I'll my first question, Chaitanya, and a lot of people are asking the same question on Q&A, is that what brought you to Darjeeling and what drew you to its tea and this story, this idea? How did you kind of get here, given the background that you come from? Uh, you were born in
Right.
Bombay. You spent all of your life in Bombay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of just tell us how you got here and how this subject kind of made interest to you, appealed to you.
Right. It's actually been, strangely enough, the same process for the film that I made after Six Strands, which is like both Court and The Disciple. And the starting point has always been some kind of, fascination and curiosity and this idea of wonder. Like I remember, okay, I must give you one disclaimer that I haven't watched the film in many, many years. I get terrified watching my own work. Even right now, I didn't watch it. But so my memory could be a bit weak about some of the things. But I remember that I was just watching a documentary and I just saw the process of tea tasting, and I found that process to be so interesting. Like they would sip and spit and, and then have something again. So and in a kind of a lab, and I found that process very, very interesting. So, and you just do things also out of naivety sometimes. So I just picked up my bags with a friend and I landed up in Darjeeling. And then, like, a whole Pandora's box kind of opened up with all kinds of, fascinating, incredible stories about, not just from like, necessarily Darjeeling, but from the world of tea, like monkeys trained to pick, like pluck tree, and like tea rolled on the laps of virgins, and just like, so, and those kind of stories were like my starting point, and you are in a kind of a romance of something. And then slowly, as you go deeper and deeper, the romance kind of gets sucked out of it, and you start seeing things for what they really are. So, and then you have to fall back in love again, but it was just this impulse of wanting to explore the world of tea. And the silver tips, I think the silver needles tea, which is like the world's most expensive tea and produced under mysterious circumstances. So that's how I just landed up in Darjeeling. And then over that whatever course of however many months it took to do the research, the script kind of slowly evolved, and the pieces kind of fell together in place.
So I was just thinking, I know, like I could count the number of filmmakers who would reach Darjeeling to make a film about tea on my fingertips. And among them, the ones who would make that film in Nepali would make that film for 15 minutes and structure it like this. I can't think of anybody.
Yeah.
So my question.
Right. I must correct you about one thing though. That language is not Nepali. It's a invented language. It's total gibberish. That's not a real language. It's a it's actually a made up like language. I mean, technically, every time I had to list the language at festivals, I would just say gibberish. So anyway,
Nepalese.
No. It just sounds like something, but it's nothing. It's not a real language. Yeah.
Right. But I think the way you've made it sound is quite close to the way people speak here.
Right. I mean, that's all credit to Pooja Sarup, the brilliant actress who went with the flow and just improvised. But it's like you can ask, Nepali people. It's not like anything, that would be familiar to them. But yeah, I know what you mean.
So what I was wondering was, there are very clear choices that kind of make the film what it is. And even though it is your first film, it kind of shows that you are approaching this process in a certain way. Like you said, there is romance first, and then you find out things that kind of take away the romance. To keep that then romance alive and also make that political point that you're trying to make. How did you arrive at that process? What were those decisions like?
Yeah. Right. So, it's a process of discovery, right? More than making decisions, it's just a process of surrendering yourself to whatever you come across. And once you encounter something, it's hard to unsee it. It's hard to because then that becomes a political choice if you keep it out entirely, or if you're in denial of something. So for me, it was just a process of surrendering to that world, and then soaking it all in, and then making sense of whatever I observed and I perceived. So yeah, you make choices, and it's a difficult process, especially the writing process. because I started out with the idea of making something like a grandmother's tale, like something that your grandmother would narrate to you, at night. So that's kind of the mood and the flavor, and it's actually in that sense quite different from my two feature films, which are very much based in like a certain kind of realism. This is more in the zone of like magical realism. But then, like I said, it's hard to unsee the other side, of this world. And then how do you merge it all together? How do you still make a cohesive whole? And how do you not make it any kind of, propaganda or some kind of, an educationist, sort of moral message. So yeah, it's a negotiation and it's a process which you kind of go through.
So tell me, Chaitanya, what kind of experiences did you have here? It's been a while, but what has kind of stayed with
Yeah.
you about Darjeeling and the making of this film? I know it's your first film, so you must
Right.
have a lot of memories about it also. Share some of those things.
Yeah. Sure. It's funny because actually, the making of Six Strands was probably the most difficult, experience and process I've ever encountered in any of my endeavors. Because I was very sort of green. I was making a film for the first time. It was a very small crew of 7 or 8 people, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I think, and they really hurt. And like I said, it was a very, very torturous process for me, like especially the shooting, not because of the people or because of lack of cooperation. It was just my own dynamics with the team I was working with the crew. I just probably didn't choose the right people to work with, and or we were not on the same page, and they gave me a real tough time. uh, but that kind of became the definitive experience which guided all my future choices. And I kind of understood what I'm comfortable with, what I'm not comfortable with, what I'm absolutely willing to do, and it taught me the value of surrounding yourself with the right energy. And it's always been my approach to like do something and then learn what it really is. So I just made the film and then I started understanding, okay, this is what filmmaking really is. So it's an actually quite an important part of my journey, and also professionally, because this film caught the attention of quite a few international film programmers who then tracked my work, and because of which court ended up in Venice, and it became what it became. And then the Disciple followed also and did, I think, reasonably well internationally. But it all kind of started with Six Strands. And but the most fun process is when you're researching, when you're prepping for the film, when you're looking at locations, when you're just talking to people, because I spoke to a lot of people there. And of course, like it's mentioned in the film, it would not have been possible without the support of Mr. Raja Banerjee, who really kind of, opened his doors and gates to whatever we wanted to do on the essay. And all the people were so helpful, so cooperative, and just such a joy to interact with, such a pleasure to interact with. And it's kind of hard to sort of encapsulate all of that in the film. Like what you end up learning and taking away is way beyond what ends up in the film. And of course we got to taste a variety of different teas as well, and got to see that whole process up close. So yeah, I could talk for hours about what I learned from Six Strands, because it really was the most harrowing and therefore also the most what do you say, revelatory lesson for me making that film.
And what about the place? Have you been here since then? What has kind of stayed about the place with you that still
Right.
guides
No,
you?
I haven't come back to Darjeeling, but I would love to. I would love to. And I only have like very fond memories of the place. When it comes to the place, I have only very fond memories of the place and the people. And I would love to, visit Darjeeling again. And sometimes I read like short stories by Ray, and I see Darjeeling. There's some story set in Darjeeling or something, and it takes me back. It takes me back to that place. I'm also very curious to see how it's changed now. I mean, with it's been, I think, 10, 11 years now since I was there. So I'm also very curious to know how it's changed. And now I don't know, because of the pandemic, what the situation is. But yeah, I would love to go back and revisit.
So I'll just pick up from something you said. You said that it's a 15-minute film and it doesn't really capture all that you kind of learned and experienced here. But having said that, I feel like it does pack in so much in 15 minutes, right? So there is the grandmother's tale kind of view of it. And then there's an entire take on the tea industry and what you see as a filmmaker wrong with it. So do you want to talk about that? Do you want to tell us what you took away about the tea industry? Because it began with a fascination for the tea tasting process and ended up becoming the tea industry in some sense. So what do you think about that today? Because that in some sense is what the collective is also about, right? Just reflecting on what's up with this industry and changing that.
Right. Yeah. So for me, the interesting process is going from the specific to the universal, in the sense that, okay, maybe there are certain elements of this story which are very specific to the tea industry. But the essence of it, I think, is applicable to so many other industries and endeavors. And in a way, so what I wanted to also explore was the idea of this romantic capitalist, the idea of somebody who is deeply passionate, fighting loneliness, fighting boredom. And loneliness is now again something I believe like that comes with the profession, because you hear about so many lonely tea estate owners, and correct me if I'm wrong there, but yeah, and then yet also how they can be so practical, so shrewd, and in this case, because it's like a fantastical tale, an oppressor, and I see that all the time, that people are deeply romantic and passionate about their own family, about their own interests, but when it comes to how they treat their workers, how they treat their employees, or when it comes to a larger social responsibility, they can be very, very insular and selfish and almost cold-hearted, And of course, the film is very playful for me. It was made in a very in a playful sense, and I was playing with elements of fantasy and magical realism to explore this political subtext and social subtext of rebellion and what happens to because when I was researching, I found out that the labor laws are stuck in pre-colonial kind of times, like pre-independence times, and they haven't been updated. The wages haven't been updated. There hasn't been enough change on that front. And again, this is not to discount the quality of the tea or the work that is put in by the tea estate, owners, or the work that, that goes into making this kind of tea or its quality, but there was also this aspect which I could not unsee now, and even then when we were prepping and researching, there was a lot of political unrest for different reasons, maybe. But there was a lot of politics. So even the protest scenes that you see in the film, they are real protests. We didn't stage them. We just captured it because it was, ongoing at that time. So yeah.
So interesting that you say that for you, it was also a film about this lonely tea estate owner. And in that sense, The Disciple is also about this lonely artist. And we received an anonymous question from somebody saying that they find parallels between your fascination with the tea tasting process and your fascination with how classical music is created. So do you want to speak a little bit about that kind of line that runs through your work?
Yeah, the thing is that, I get bored very easily, and I come from a very sort of insular background. Like I have lived on literally one street all my life, and like a typical middle class family. So for me, it's a way to educate myself. It's a way to broaden my own imagination, and creative horizons. And it takes you out of yourself to immerse yourself in another world and to do research. And I guess I am driven by wonder and fascination. So, I did a play which was based on magic, and there was a time when I was exploring the world of magic. I mean, even I'm just sitting. I have like, because I do magic for the last 14 years, but I have like cards everywhere, even right now. But yeah, and then it was about this tea, and then court was about, okay, how do things unfold in like the lower courts of Mumbai, and the Disciple is the music. So I guess like, and now I'm again waiting to be inspired by something else, because it becomes a marriage of something that's external and fascinating and alien, marrying that with something that's deeply personal to you. So for example, that cheese cherry pineapple that she's eating, that's my favorite food as a child whenever I would go to restaurants, and she's just trying substitution for that taste or whatever, and I love food. So yeah, so it still comes from a personal, space, but sort of, how do I say, sugar coated in this alien world, and that's exciting for me. And I guess that is a common thread, across my work so far.
Lovely. I'm quite fascinated by the cards all around you. I'll write to you about that.
Yeah,
We've received a lot
sure.
of questions about the inspiration that you've drawn from other people. Somebody is asking if Vishal Bhardwaj's Makadi was an inspiration, and in general, a lot of questions from film lovers about what are the kind of visual sources, filmmakers whose work has inspired you as a filmmaker.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. The thing is, I'll be very honest when it comes to my own work. I find it a little boring to take very direct, like, visual references. So no, I don't know if there were any direct sort of, visual references or film references, like, oh, we'll make it like this or we'll make it like that. There was a general mood that I was inspired by. Like I told you, like, stories that I found fascinating. In fact, there is a short story by Satyajit Ray called Fritz, if I'm not mistaken. That was a big inspiration for me. It's an incredible story about a boy who buries a doll. And, after many years, he goes and he wants to find that doll that he had buried. And it said farewell to that doll because it's leaving the city, I think, or that village. And then he finally manages to find that place, and he digs a thing up, and there is a skeleton of that doll with just the costume, and it just blew my mind. Like, it was so strange and macabre and wonderful. But apart from that, yeah, I mean, otherwise, while as a viewer, a lot of different filmmakers, inspired me back then, and I mean, continue to inspire me. But again, I feel like I'm more inspired by individual films than, entire bodies of work. But quite a few different filmmakers like Kiarostami and Haneke and Buster Keaton and Fellini and Kubrick and Ray, and many filmmakers.
We've received a very direct and important, but also like killjoy type of question. We've been asked, how did you find the funds for this film, and what would you tell young filmmakers who want to make a film like this on a far off place, on something like Tea?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my budgets now, it's quite a low budget film. It was made with very limited resources. And when I spoke about, mistakes that I made a lot of mistakes. This was one kind of big mistake that I made. And maybe I can use this platform to apologize to my father, because this film was actually funded entirely by my father. So the thing is, I wanted to go to a film school, say in New York or LA, and we couldn't afford it. We didn't have the money. So my deal with my father was that, you let me make one short film, you fund that short film, and that's my film school. That's the money, and because it's much lesser compared to how much you would spend in a film school, and so that was it. This was my film school. I borrowed money from my father. So what the mistake was that I was too embarrassed to admit that it's funded by my father. So I didn't credit him in the film. He doesn't have a single credit in the film. And so that's and you make mistakes and you learn. So I mean, from then on, I've been very careful about crediting family members and loved ones, because sometimes you take them for granted. So I'm very sorry, Dad, if you're watching this, which I'm sure you will.
Oh, well, we have a question from Professor Romita Ray. Do you want to ask the question yourself, ma'am?
Hi there. I'm tuning in from upstate New York. So this was brilliant. Thank you so much, Chaitanya, for sharing your film. And I think you brought the magic of the hills and also the seriousness of the industry to us as well. But I just had a quick question. Sparsh could have easily asked it, or Anand as well. In fact, I'm going to just read them. One was, what made you choose a female tea planter as your chief protagonist? And the second, of course, is, Raja Banerjee's spirit in this film, because you showed the moonlight tradition of plucking tea, which is so particular to Makai Badi's magic. So if you could give us some sense of both the female protagonist as well as the reality of the ground of, as you said, soaking in this energy, right, of the landscape, the tea, but also of the extraordinary Raja Banerjee himself. So if you could give us a few thoughts, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for your question, Rumita. And thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah, I don't remember why it's a female protagonist, but I think I would totally stand by that choice. It just makes it so much more interesting and layered and, nuanced in a different way. But I don't exactly know why it's a female character, because I must have made that choice back then. But I think it's a very, very interesting choice. And yes, of course, Raja Banerjee's spirit, looms large over the entire film, because Raja is such a fascinating character. He is such an interesting character, and of course, he's not a direct inspiration for the character of the lady, but he is also, quite a big inspiration for the film. And Makai Bari Estate, serves as an inspiration for this little kingdom that this lady has in the film. But again, it's not so direct, it's not so literal always, where you see something and then you just incorporate it into the film. I mean, uh, a character like Raja, the tea that he produces, these are starting points of inspiration for me. These are sparks of inspiration for me. And there is also a kind of an interaction between reality and fiction, because it's hard to tell which part of it is reality and which part of it is fiction. Like, the place is real, the workers are actually, tea workers, the protest is real, but then the character is fictitious completely. So, but I did find Raja to be this very, very mysterious and also very colorful character. And I'd seen documentaries on him back then. I remember him in his outfit, the officer's khaki outfit, riding a horse and tasting tea. And again, like I said, the film is critical of certain things, but at the same time, I can't discount the fact that that film was made possible because of his cooperation and support. And again, speaking of, mistakes, Anand, like, I was so worried back then, like what Raja would make of the film, if he would approve of it or not. I did not have the guts to show it to him. I don't even remember if I showed him the film, and it's not something I'm, proud of. But I was not sure back then, like, if he will approve of this film or not, of what I have made. But yeah, yeah. So you learn, you learn from your mistakes, I would say.
There's a lot of young film lovers, aspirational filmmakers who've joined the call. And I think the one thing that we can definitely take away from here is your honesty. You've already issued 2 apologies and acknowledged 2 mistakes on this call itself. Really,
it's because it's very, I have not spoken about Six Strands in a long time, and time gives you that perspective. And because, again, to be very honest, Six Strands didn't really do well with Indian audiences. Like, whatever little Indian audience it had, I don't think they got the film. So I mean, it did very well internationally, but in India, I feel like now, because it's a movie and because of Court and Disciple, there is some renewed interest in the film. So it's interesting for me also to be able to talk about the film.
Speaking about getting the film, we've got a very interesting question about how Six Strands, being so experimental and surreal in the way it approaches the subject, it must have been very hard to pitch and explain to your own crew. And you've already spoken about how you may have not made the best choices then. But what was that struggle like? Kind of getting people on board with the vision that you have, the kind of mode you want to create, the reality you want.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I was very green back then. Like, I was too raw. So I had the vision in my head, but I could have prepped better, and again, I could have just chosen a different team which would be more respectful of the process that I wanted to follow. But yeah, we did prep a lot. I mean, we did work on the production design, we did work on the location scouts, and even in post production we worked quite a lot. And I don't think it was really more of a problem in communicating the intent. When it came to the script, people were quite on board, but it changes when you hit the ground and you have to actually shoot something. And again, like I said, a lot of those mistakes were mine as well, where I wanted things to be done in a certain way, but maybe it was not practical, whatever. But I must say, having said all of that, if I keep humility aside for a moment, that I don't think the film really reflects the level of turbulence that it experienced in its making. I think the film turned out. I was quite okay with how the film turned out back then. I haven't seen it now, but back then I was okay with it.
Fiorenza has a question. Do you want to ask it, Fiorenza?
Okay, yeah, sorry. I could not type the question. I was about to type the question. Yes, I have a question to the filmmaker. Sorry, I cannot say his name correctly. So you spoke about Raja Banerjee as a romantic capitalist. I met him at the same time of you, I think in 2011. And my question is, after 10 years, do you see him still as a romantic capitalist or more as a pioneering leadership or leader, a visionary leader who tried and he's still trying to change the vision about Darjeeling, not only tea, but Darjeeling possibility of sustainable development. So did you change your vision or is still like 10 years ago?
Right. Thank you for the question, Fiorenza. No, so let me clarify what I meant. When I said a romantic capitalist, that was not for Raja, that was for the character that I had written. And like I said that, it's not a film about, Raja. It's not a film about Makai Bari, even in that sense. It's a film inspired by different stories and different characters I encountered, and it happens to be shot in Makai Bari. But yeah, Raja is not the subject or was not the subject of my study, and I don't feel I'm anybody to comment on his huge body of work and what he's done for the industry, because it's not just my field of expertise. It would be very stupid of me to comment on Raja's body of work. So I'm sorry if you misunderstood what I said.
Yeah, I have one question, Chaitanya. So my question is, do you think that storytellers in general and filmmakers in particular have some kind of a duty or an obligation to, go out of where they are and the world that they're familiar with to tell different stories about different people? Do you think that is something that one should expect or should rightly desire from our storytellers?
Right. I'm not so sure about it. When it comes to these kind of very absolute rules, I develop cold feet, because there is no one way of looking at art. There is no one way of telling stories. Every human being is an island in themselves, and you could just go within and come up with innumerable stories. And then there is somebody like me who likes going, in different worlds and immersing myself in different worlds and getting inspired by that. But I don't think that the only obligation an artist has is to tell the truth. I feel that's the only allegiance we owe to our audiences is to tell the truth. And again, there are different kinds of truths. Truth is not necessarily reality. There could be truth in beauty, there could be truth in ugliness, there could be truth in nothingness, or in rocks and nature and stone, and in human behavior, in human life, in the human condition. So I would say that it's there is no one way of looking at it.
But you would agree that that this responsibility to tell the truth and tell different truths kind of also compels us to also reach out beyond where we are, right? Because if that would not be the case, we'd only have films on Bombay, films in Delhi, films in Calcutta. And it is because the Six Strands exist that we also think about making a film on Darjeeling.
But now you're getting into a different conversation, because trust me, there are so many different kinds of films being made in the country, in so many different languages, in so many different places, capturing so many different cultures and ethoses. But 0.1% of it reaches us. Now we are talking about the systematic problems in distribution, in exhibition, in what the mainstream media celebrates, how the viewers express their choice as to this is what we want to watch. So like I said, even a film like Six Strands didn't do well in India, back then. Like yeah, it didn't even qualify for some of the Indian film festivals, and it was like going to Edinburgh and Clermont-Ferrand, which is the biggest film festival in the world for short films, and Rotterdam. So that's a very different issue, because there are films that are being made, in the country, and like you are curious about wanting to see stories which are not based in Mumbai or Calcutta or Delhi and from different places about different things. But that's the real pity, that that you and those makers are not are connected. And by you, I mean audiences around the country, who would want something different, who would want to see something meaningful, because it's almost now a monopolistic, like a tyranny and an onslaught of content, as they call them these days, like, which all looks the same, feels the same. So
but on that note, I'll shoot my last question, Chaitanya, and that is,
sure.
Now that Court and Disciple have kind of pushed people like us to also look at Six Strands and find it and discover it and talk about it, would Chaitanya Tamhane want to make another film, maybe a full-length film on Darjeeling or anywhere else that comes close to this and allows you to revisit this fascination that kind of started your filmmaking career, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it is unlikely that it will be exactly the same subject or the same setting, because again, one of my objectives after I finish a film is to shed skin, which is to forget all of that and then move on to different pastures. But never say never. For example, The Disciple is actually a reimagining of a play that I had made, which I told you was about magic, called Grey Elephant. So never say never. And I would love to again make a film, which is not set in Mumbai and which challenges me in different ways and is like a new landscape for me. So let's see.
I've received one last question from the audience. I'll just share it with you. It's a longish question, or maybe I'll read it out. Picking up from his concept of truth and nothingness and his interest in magic realism, how did you work with the ephemeral quality of mist in your imaging and storytelling? Mist being so much a part of the Darjeeling landscape and evocative of the spectral, ghostly phenomenon. The stark scene of a mysterious burial site in the film comes to mind.
Right. Again, I think it's a great question. And that's the thing, like, whenever you go, you have to kind of be like, which I spoke about, surrendering, right? So I vaguely remember the shot she's talking about, and some of those things were not in our control. Like, there just happened to be wind, there just happened to be a dog crossing the frame, and that's the beauty of being open and present, where magic actually does happen outside of you. If you give it enough time and you pay enough attention, you will see the magic unfolding in the air, in the landscape where you are. So the mist, you just have to land up there and observe the mist and be open to it. And then it kind of subconsciously becomes a part of the work that you're trying to, do in that space and that place.
So in the hope that this session inspires Chaitanya to make another film on Darjeeling, or maybe if not Chaitanya, then inspires so many other people. Six Strands should make people want to make films on Darjeeling. Right? I hand over to Sparsh.
Wow, thank you so much, Chaitanya. I mean, it's been a charming evening. I've obviously watched Six Strands before. I can tell you a little bit about how I came to it. About 4 months back, I get a call from Anand, who tells me that, we've just recently watched The Disciple and Court, but did you know that Chaitanya's first film was actually on Darjeeling? And the two of us, along with another couple of friends, we watch a lot of films together, and that really got us very, very excited. And then my parents, myself, all of us, we watched it together, and we were really super fascinated. And that's how we reached out to you. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope that some of you were able to watch the film on Zoom. I mean, that was our little effort at trying to bring you closer to a movie hall during these times. Thank you, Anand, for doing this. I think that I personally thought that the Jugalbandi between you and Chaitanya was great. It was great to tune in and to be able to hear this conversation. So just a couple more notes. Six Strands is available on Mubi. Movie is a great place to watch very good curated cinema. It supports independent filmmakers, and I would personally recommend it highly to everyone who's here. If you haven't been able to watch it properly today for any reasons, go on to Movie, buy a subscription, and watch the film. A little bit about, I think, Chaitanya, you've captured, Raja keeps saying that it's not Darjeeling tea, it's magical, mystical Himalayan herb. And you've captured the magic, you've captured the mystique of this Himalayan herb. You've done a great job. Thank you so much again for joining us. Just a little bit. So we've recently started the Selim Hill Collective. The Selim Hill Collective is an organization that is working towards the revival of my family's tea estate in Darjeeling by the name of Selim Hill. Raja, after he left Makai a few years ago, he's been working on a small growers initiative by the name of Rinpoche. He is now the chairman of the Selim Hill Collective, and he's helping us on creating a new revival for Selim Hill Tea Estate, especially after the pandemic. Chaitanya's point is very valid about the labor laws and the conditions as well. One of the mandates and the long-term visions of the Selim Hill Collective is to move towards a new management style with a more inclusive stakeholder approach, where the community members get their due. The biodiversity is part of the entire monocultural practice of growing tea at Selim Hill. But for that, we also require stakeholders in the form of customers. And hence, it is Dorje and Selim Hill Collective, which is working together to revival of Selim Hill Tea Estate. So if you do like what we're trying to do, if you feel that you resonate with our mission, with our aim, we're planning to organize sessions of echoes every Friday at the same time. Next week, we have the Grammy Award-winning music composer and environmentalist Vicky Kedge. His last album was Winds of Samsara. His new album is Divine Tides. We will be watching one of those album videos from that. Please join us for that. And if you would like to support the activities of the Selim Hill Collective, you can go on to www.dorjeteas.com. Buying a subscription really helps us give back to the community, to support afforestation programs within the garden, and to start taking on more newer initiatives to move towards this idea of creating an inclusive stakeholder approach. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined us today. We've had Chaitanya join us from Goa, Anand join us from Bhutan, Ishan has joined us from Calcutta, Raja from Darjeeling. Thank you to all the panelists who've been here for taking the time out. Hope you have a great weekend ahead. And I guess if anyone does have any more, because a lot of film students also joined, and they did have a lot of technical questions as well. If you can send it off to me, maybe I can, with permission from Chaitanya after the call, I can try to connect you to him. Maybe that might help you guys also with your filmmaking journey. And with that, I'll end my spiel here and hope to see you soon, very soon in Darjeeling, Chaitanya. Dorje and the Selim Hill Collective are based out of Second Chance House. To all artists, writers, researchers who have tuned in, if you would like to be a part of our journey, contact us and we can figure out some way in which you can contribute and help out. Thank you so much.
I would love to do that, Sparsh, and thank you once again for being so patient and for coordinating with me and my schedule for so long. But this was an absolute joy. Thank you so much for bringing back all those memories of the film and for inviting me to do this. Thank you, Anand, and thank you, Raja.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya, and thank you so much, Sparsh, for the chance to do this. Really love this. Chaitanya is the sweetest person I've ever spoken to. Just putting it out there.